Good morning. Ready to start. Thank you for your patience. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Mwaramutse, good morning, bonjour, salam alaikum, bom dia. Welcome to the 26th World Economic Forum on Africa and the Kigali chapter of the Forum's partnership with the continent through its economic and social transformation. Please allow me to begin by expressing solidarity with the people and government of Rwanda, who have been facing historical heavy rains and floods over the past week. I take the liberty, on behalf of the Forum family, all of us gathered here and elsewhere, and Professor Schwab, to offer our sincere condolences to the families that have lost loved ones. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a digital world, and in this context, Professor Schwab would like to say a few words.
See President Kagame, distinguished heads of state and government, dear participants, a very cordial welcome to this World Economic Forum on Africa. Due to an ear infection, unfortunately, I cannot be with you this time physically. I regret it very much because Africa is very close to the World Economic Forum's heart and to my own heart. We are here, a true multi-stakeholders assembly. I would like to welcome particularly all the participants from governments, from international organizations, from African organizations. A very cordial welcome to you, our partners and members. And also, of course, very important for the World Economic Forum, the integration of civil society, of social entrepreneurs, of the young generation. We are here not only to analyze the situation of Africa, we are here to improve the state of Africa. If you look at the context, we have to be aware that we are living in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. This is a revolution which will change everything. It will change how we produce, how we consume, how we live, how we communicate. It will change the business models. It will change also the competitive framework of each country. Of course, I'm aware that many people still do not profit yet from the benefits of the second revolution, electricity, or from the benefits of the third revolution, the access to the internet. So we are here to look how we can close the gaps, but at the same time, how we can prepare Africa for the future. I see so many dynamic forces. I see the young generation ready to engage in very entrepreneurial ways. This is the hope of Africa. We are here, as I said, not just to analyze issues. We are here for action. And for this reason, I'm very proud that during this meeting, we will give birth to a number of initiatives where I hope they will have a significant and lasting impact on the future of this great continent. Before I close, let me use this opportunity to thank you, President Kagame, to thank you, the government of Rwanda, and the people of Rwanda for your great hospitality. I would like to thank also the co-chairs for being here and to guide us through the discussions of the next 24, 36 hours. And finally, I would like to introduce the great ambassador of Africa inside the World Economic Forum, who has also the responsibility for this meeting, Elsie, Kanza.
A couple of months ago, a young lady asked me what my legacy was, given that this is my 5th Africa meeting. 5 years ago, on the global level, Africa was being touted as the next India. Today, there seems to be a mixed view. All I can say is that if one has been across Africa over this period, significant changes for the better are apparent. Obstacles are present, setbacks emerge, and the steady march to a better Africa continues. Ladies and gentlemen, my legacy is a dream. My dream is to send a rural village African girl to Mars in a spaceship designed, built, and launched in Africa. I believe this can be done. I believe this can be done because it is not a new dream. Almost 60 years ago, President John F. Kennedy dreamt of sending a man to the moon, and it laid the foundation for a substantive space industry and spawned new breakthroughs such as medical technologies, weather forecasting, computer technology, and telecommunications. What is different about my dream is that with the 4th Industrial Revolution, Africa can create tomorrow's industries today faster and better. I believe this can be done because the commitment is there. 70% of Africans are younger than 30 years. 1,000 global shapers across 94 African cities, represented here by 50, please rise, launched the hashtag Internet for All campaign a month ago and sparked a regional and global conversation about the impact the internet is already having on their lives. By social media metrics, over 160 million potential impressions have occurred since 7th April 2016. I believe this can be done because the seeds are being planted. And during this gathering, you'll hear about Rwanda's reach beyond digital by establishing Africa's first quantum research institute, as well as the efforts to inspire the current generation of schoolgirls to equip themselves with the skills to launch Africa's first non-commercial satellite in 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, this plenary session will explore how Africa can master the 4th Industrial Revolution. My view is that if this August gathering of national, regional, and global leaders here think the unthinkable, imagine the unimaginable, and do the undoable, why not? With those few words, I have the honor and privilege of inviting His Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, to officially open this meeting. Mubi twemereye, nyakubawa, Perezida wa Repubulika, mwatugezaho, imma nuro, mwatu ganeye, kuri uyu munsi, murakoze.
Dear brothers, heads of state here present, distinguished sisters, brothers, leaders of industry from Africa and across the world here present, on behalf of my country, I'm very glad to welcome you to Rwanda for the World Economic Forum on Africa. There is something significant in WEF's approach to Africa that I would like to emphasize at the outset. It is free of pity and apprehension. The Africa that the world meets through WEF is a continent of opportunity and partnership, and a full actor in the story of globalization, sharing common values and ambitions. Moreover, to be able to convene the forum here in Rwanda demonstrates that optimism about Africa's prospects is always the best response to adversity. We are therefore pleased to be a host and a partner. A compelling vision for our joint future can be found in Professor Schwab's notion of the fourth industrial revolution, which frames this year's agenda. And I wish Professor Schwab a quick recovery. The transformative power of information technology is at the core. But ICTs are not a magic bullet. There is a bigger context. Let me mention two elements to get us started. First, financial technology. Boutique investing is critically important, but Africa needs scale. That means building the deep and efficient capital markets that enable institutional investors, such as pension funds, to achieve stable, reliable returns by investing in African infrastructure and businesses. ICTs are making such markets platforms commercially viable for the first time. But we need to be thinking even bigger because Africa needs access to that capital in order to grow. Second, and the most important of all, is what we might call people technology. Development is about more than money, or machines, or good policies. It's about real people and the lives they lead with the countless choices made each and every day. In practice, this means cultivating a good politics that demands accountability and results from leaders, promotes unity over division, and protects the stability and security which are the foundation of everything else. It is a myth that economic and social development can ever occur without civic participation and rights. It is also a myth that there is only one acceptable way to build a just, free, and equitable society. Finally, let me conclude by stressing that our hopes and ambitions for the future must be built on a foundation of clear-headed realism. The fourth industrial revolution builds on the previous ones, which largely passed Africa by. As a result, our continent barely registers in global value chains. Africa can only claim its place at the table by earning it. Leapfrogging has its limits, and we must remain mindful of the gaps that hold us back and be able to address them. Africa should not still be playing catch-up by the time the fifth industrial revolution comes around. If we can use this time together to look for ways to harness the fourth industrial revolution for everyone's benefit based on the inherent dignity and value of each person, we will really have accomplished something useful. Thank you and best wishes for a productive meeting and a rewarding stay here in our country, Rwanda. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and pleasure to be moderating our today's opening panel with such esteemed guests. And of course, you all know our panelists, but allow me to briefly introduce our distinguished guests. Of course, President Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, and at the same time, he is member of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum's System Initiative, Future of the Internet. Mr. President, again, thank you for your hospitality. It's a great honor to have you here today. The business voice. We have here the Global Managing Director of McKinsey, Dominic Barton, and at the same time, co-chair of our this year's Africa World Economic Forum. So Dominic, a warm welcome to you as well. Also co-chair, but well known as a humanitarian champion, Grac Machel. She is well known because of her fight for children's rights and women empowerment. Grac, it's a great honor to have you here today. And last but not least, co-chair as well a long-standing friend of the World Economic Forum, the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Warm welcome to you. And ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, our founder and executive chairman, Professor Schwab, coined in his recent book the term of the fourth industrial revolution. And now we are here to answer the question how Africa can use the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution for economic growth and social prosperity. And the challenge is pretty clear. Alone in the Northern Corridor, we are talking about 160 million people without any access to the internet. That's more than 75%. And that means they can all not benefit from the opportunities given by the fourth industrial revolution. And in this context, we all know that one of the biggest challenges is the question of investment into infrastructure. Means investment into basic infrastructure, such as electricity, as well as investment into more advanced infrastructure, such as broadband. But the good news is, Africa is a continent of hope and opportunity. And a recent study says that we, of course, have all in a collaborative effort the opportunity to bring in the next 3 years more than 75 million people in addition online. So, Mr. President, allow me to raise the first question to you. What are the concrete next steps of the Rwandan government in order to foster the initiative Internet for All?
We've looked at three key things. One is, it's all about investments. How do we invest and how do we prioritize these investments in order for us to avail the internet for all and avail access and affordability. But access is also to do with infrastructure. So we are looking at investments in infrastructure. It's about human capital. And then how do we create businesses around that so that everybody participates and benefits from that. And what Rwanda has done from the outset has been investment in these areas. We have invested in broadband infrastructure that covers the whole country. We have close to 4,000 kilometers fiber optic running from one place to another across the country. And we have also invested in the institutions that will avail the knowledge and skills required for people to benefit when they use the internet that is available. And then create institutions that would avail capital whenever that is required for mainly small and medium businesses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dominic, from a business perspective, what will be the impact of investment into Africa's digital economy for business as well as for society?
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and to be in Rwanda, to be in Africa. I think that there are huge benefits from those investments, but I might talk about two aspects of it, and this is purely from the private sector point of view. First of all, this infrastructure is required, and the President talked about the need for the pension funds and actually private capital to come in here. We need the power, we need electricity, as you've talked about many times, to be able to enable the fourth industrial revolution to occur, to be able to link up those 180 million people that you're talking about. And I think that there are ways to actually attract foreign capital to come in and be able to do it. And what we need to do is make sure that there are bankable projects. There's lots of ideas, but are they bankable? And recognize that a lot of these pension funds and capital providers who have a lot of resources don't have very many people. Some of them, you know, the Canada Pension Plan, $360 billion, has basically 200 people in there to be able to look at it. They can't come and look at every country in Africa and look at the opportunities. So we need to market those opportunities in a more precise manner, and those will yield returns and will have a flywheel effect. So the first is accessing private capital to actually invest in the infrastructure because it's a profitable thing to do. We obviously need the multilaterals to play a role, but that's one aspect we should look at. We need a lot more capital in here. The second is that in almost every single industry or sector that you look at in Africa, and this is, I'm like I said, bullish on Africa, this is where the future is, including agriculture, that is an ICT business. You know, the technology revolution going on and how you manage dairy herds is quite remarkable in where it is, and we can apply that and improve the productivity of what we do. Healthcare, you know, healthcare is a screaming need across the place. Some economies, it's only 2% of GDP, and in other economies in Western Europe and the United States, it's 12 to 14%. ICT and the fourth industrial revolution, I think, is going to allow us to revolutionize that and provide healthcare, by the way, in a profitable manner through using the technology that's there. And the final point I would just make, just again on this, the business opportunities or private sector opportunities, is education. And you've talked about this before, but we need to revolutionize education because and I think what the fourth industrial revolution helps do is do that. And I think we have to move away from 4-year qualification programs and tertiary education as the way to do it. We can train people with high school education, and not the high-performing people in high school, in 4 to 6 weeks to be job ready by using technology and linking education with the employers. And we need to revolutionize it. And this is an opportunity for Africa because, by the way, education needs to be revolutionized everywhere. Let's do it here and get those millions of youth, that the endowment that we have in Africa, ready to move. And I think by embracing the fourth industrial revolution, we can do it. So that's it.
Thank you, Dominic, for raising the strong link between economy and education. And we all know that inclusive growth is pretty important because growth without equality is not desirable. So I would like to learn now from Grac. How should Africa embrace the fourth industrial revolution in order to foster equality, social inclusion, and of course, stronger civic participation? Grac.
I would like to start by reminding all of us that the 3 previous revolutions have left 50% of Africans behind, women. And if we are to look at the future, and in the discussions we are having here during these 3 days, then we should look at what it means to develop power for women. Women in rural areas, in our urban settings. What does it mean? And whether we plan we see how we are going to develop those industries, I think they should have also the face and the needs of women. And it's not a favor. They are 50% of the population. We are discussing here what we are going to do in terms of developing technologies to feed Africa. Those who produce more of our food, it has been said many times, are women. But the technologies they are using are even, maybe of 18th century. We are discussing here, whatever we want to talk about infrastructure. Where are the women? These infrastructures, they mean a lot to them, where they live, where they are working. Does these infrastructures reach them? Are they taking part in development of infrastructure? They are part of creating wealth in any of the areas in which we are. I'm making this as a point of, one, it's an issue of business case. Talking of women, it's not a humanitarian. I am a humanitarian person. I work in human rights. But I'm talking here business-wise. And even in terms of common sense, no leader will develop the nation if it doesn't bring the face and the needs and the participation of women at the center stage. It will be simply half of it. We will not succeed. So it's to me, it really makes common sense as leadership, whether you are in political sphere, you are in economic sphere, you are in scientific sphere, cultural, wherever you are, you just need to bring the energy, the knowledge, the expertise, the creativity, and even leadership skills which women bring, because they bring different kind of leadership skills. So talking of inclusion, it is an imperative of achieving whatever we want as development, and even looking, ahead of where we want to be with this fourth revolution. We cannot continue to leave women behind. The second point I wanted to make, which is also very close to my heart, and Dominic has mentioned here, is that I want to submit to African leaders of all spheres that we need to take time really to revisit and change, I can say almost completely, our education systems. Children are being taught with the same methods which I was taught when I was a child. And I am 7 decades old. So how do you think of a future? How do you think of a transformation of our societies when you are not investing from the early age, of course, to adolescents, to younger ones? In a way, education has to be far ahead of what we want today. It has to prepare young generations for the skills and the capabilities which we will need in 10, 15, 20 years ahead. And we seem to be trying to manage systems in a way as if it's a business as usual. I think we need really to take a deep look at this and to transform radically our systems of education. I want to mention very quickly here that the initiative of having the African leadership universities, it's exactly that creative disruption which we are bringing, where we combine the classroom as such, but business is in to say what it is which are the requirements of the productive world if you are to prepare young people then to be employable, as you say, even if it's for them to start their own business. So this education thing, to be short, it needs to bring the public sector. The private sector has to indicate, because you are very well planned ahead, actually. You know what you need today, but you know what you're going to need in 10, 15 years. Tell the public system to reform on the basis of the needs of productive world. Bring scientists who can research to bring to our continent the best practices which exist all over the world, so that we can reform, we can change, but we take advantage of what has been proven to be effective somewhere else, and then we can talk of the so-called leapfrog, which we talk about here. So I want to end saying we can think of, of the fourth revolution, but this continent has almost 60 million kids who are out of school. They're simply not even in school. So we need to be thinking ahead, but leaving no one behind, it means to have the face of those children to be in the mainstream. Leaving no one behind, it means to have the face of women where they are. Leaving no one, it's the young people who, many of them, even when they have a secondary education, they are not employable, they don't have the skills. So I think we need really to have a more comprehensive sort of planning, so that when we go ahead, we have to remember those who have been left behind and how do we bring them on board.
Thank you, Grac, and I think we all couldn't agree more that one learning of the first three industrial revolutions is that no country, no continent should be left behind, particularly in light of the fourth industrial revolution. And that brings me then to Dr. Adesina. So from your perspective, as the president of the African Development Bank, what should Africa do in order to be part of the development in the light of the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, thank you very much. First, let me thank you, President Kagame, for inviting us here and also to be in this beautiful city of Kigali. Let me say that we can talk about the first industrial revolution, the second, the third. We can go to the 10th industrial revolution. It really doesn't matter. There are certain fundamentals you must get right in any revolution. The first one is Africa today doesn't even have electricity. And so if you're talking about digital literacy, you're talking about ICT, computing, you're talking about how you take Internet of Things, all of that revolves around having access to electricity. You've got a continent with 645 million people without access to electricity. Well, we're sitting on a huge amount of potential of electricity. I think that that's why at the African Development Bank, and also with a lot of the African presidents that are here, we've made a decision that Africa is tired of being in the dark. And therefore, we need to accelerate universal access to electricity within 10 years. Look at China. I mean, China is adding 4,000 megawatts of electricity every month, right? And Africa is here with the same amount of capacity to produce electricity just like Belgium, okay, just for a whole continent like this. No, we cannot industrialize, we cannot be competitive unless we solve the problem of access to electricity. And that's why the African Development Bank launched what's called the New Deal on Energy for Africa to drive that universal access to electricity, and will invest about $12.5 billion in 5 years in working with other partners to be able to solve that problem. The second issue I want to also touch about, which I think Barton talked about, is the broadband issue. Because if you're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, you really must have cost-competitive broadband to be able to compete. Because you're talking about cloud-based technologies in which you need access to speed, okay? And if you look at us today, Africa has less than 20% in terms of broadband access. Internet access is even very, very low. So you can't really be talking about digital computing if you don't have access to that. That's why I really want to say that the whole initiative around, submarine cables, that President Kagame was talking about, the East and Southern Africa submarine infrastructure is very critical to that. However, there are fundamentals that remain. Take R&D expenditure for us in Africa today. We're spending less than 0.1% of our total budget, GDP, on R&D. If you take the countries that have been there in the first industrial revolution, the second, the third, and now in fourth, they're spending 4 or 5% of their GDP on R&D. Take the capacity in terms of number of scientists we have, right? We don't have enough scientists as Africa, and we must invest in that, because you can't, I don't believe in leapfrogging, by the way. I don't understand what it means, right? Because a frog can't go far. It doesn't matter how much it tries to leapfrog. What Africa needs is projectile. You got to project things faster. And that requires you to have the scientific capacity. Look at the numbers today. They're not pretty. And I'm glad we have our leaders here so we can actually look at what we need to do differently. Denmark has 10,000 scientists per 1 million people. Finland has 10,500. Okay, the country that has the highest is South Africa, probably about 800 for 1 million people. So we've got to totally change that to be able to participate at all in any revolution. But even as we do that, we've got to also make sure that our capacity to innovate expands. I'm actually quite shocked to look at where Africa is today in terms of innovation index globally. We are at the very, very bottom, right? And if you look at patents and how many patents are registered in the US Office of Patents, every year, 276,000. Africa counts about 300, okay? So 1% of that. So we've got to really be very creative. And I think that's where I want to end with my big sister, what you talked about, the educational system. We've got to, and I'm glad my other big sister, Ngozi, is here because she's also doing great work on science and technology. I really think that we need to invest heavily in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I want to applaud what both President Kagame is doing, but also President Machel with the new Einstein initiative and what you have here in terms of the ICT setup. This is fundamental if we are going to succeed at all. So I think investing in this area is important. For us as the African Development Bank, here is what we are trying to do to take what is that demographic asset and turn it into a dividend. We are launching what is called a Jobs for Africa Youth Initiative. And it comes back to Barton's point. That initiative is targeted at creating jobs for 25 million youths in 10 years. We've got to have high ambition for Africa. We can't have low ambitions for Africa at all. But in looking at that, 3 areas are critical. Skills for agriculture value chain development, skills in ICT, in particular when it comes to kids that are in school, they have to have digital literacy, logical thinking, ability to actually do complex problems, because that's really where everything revolves around. And also we have a program that will be supporting countries to do, which has to do with what Barton was saying, coding for employment. As industrial clusters change in the world, people will be looking for what part of the world has the readiness index. And we want to make sure Africa is ready in terms of skills, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity to engage in that 4th industrial revolution. And to enable that, as a bank, we have what they call Boost Africa Initiative. We're going to be putting together a fund of $5 billion that's going to help the business of young people. You can have the greatest ideas in the world. If it has no money, it doesn't go anywhere. And Bill Gates didn't just come up. There has to be private equity funds and that support them. So the African Development Bank believes that the future of Africa's youth, it doesn't really lie at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, the kind of things we're seeing today. It lies in tapping their talent, tapping their entrepreneurship, and putting our resources behind them. I have no doubt at all that not only can we benefit and quickly take advantage of the revolutions we missed in the past by investing in energy and other things, but we can prepare ourselves to thrive. We have to thrive, even for that 4th industrial revolution. So I believe the future for Africa is great, and I'm sure as we do these things, we'll be able to do quite well. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Adesina, and thank you to all of you for sharing your views on Africa and to set the context for the entire World Economic Forum on Africa. Because everything what you addressed, hopefully we can address during the next 24 hours. Education, investment, infrastructure questions, and not only talking about leapfrogging, what you mentioned, but really to come to development and no one left behind again. So finally, I would give you the opportunity to encourage us, and I will ask you, all of you, the same question. So what is your vision, your dream for Africa? Look at maybe 2020. What will Africa look like in 2020 in the light of the different industrial revolutions? Maybe we can start with His Excellency President Kagame.
Well, I pick it from where Grac mentioned leaving women behind. You see, Africa's problem is much bigger than that. We have women left behind, not involved as they should and having their rights as they should. But we have men of Africa just ahead of women, but behind everyone else in the world. So my thinking is we need to move together. Women must be at the same level as men in Africa. And they will only be differentiated by their different talents and capacities, otherwise not by whether one is a woman and another is a man. But the main thing here is for us, Africa cannot afford and should not tolerate playing catch-up all the time on everything, given what is happening elsewhere in the world. So I think in another 5 years, 10 years, Africa, we should do something about it, and we are capable of doing that. We just need to focus, prioritize, organize ourselves, and do it knowing that it is for ourselves and nobody else is going to do it for us.
Thank you, Mr. President. And allow me to bring in that Rwanda is most advanced in terms of gender equality. In our gender gap report, Rwanda is number 1 in Africa and number 6 among 145 states. I will not mention my home state, Germany. So let's move to Dominic. Dominic, what is your dream? What is your vision for Africa?
There are many different aspects I'd love to talk about. The one I'd actually focus on primarily is actually youth unemployment. Youth unemployment is very high across Africa, and if we don't fix the education system and provide the 4 to 6 week programs that can get people the roles, we're not going to live up to the potential of the continent. So I would like to see, just as an indicator of where things are, it will lead to many other, I think, benefits for the world and for the continent, that we have a less than 5% youth unemployment rate. That would be a goal I would love to set. It's ambitious, but I think it focuses us on what we need to do to ensure everyone can participate in the opportunity that's here.
Thank you, Dominic. Grac.
I'll be a bit generic, but I would like to see from now, before I think what is going to happen in 10 years, I would like to see our leaders, both political and private, to be much more action-oriented. I think we have been very good in having policies and the strategies and the plans, but we are very, very weak in implementing our own decisions and our own commitments. So for us to get there, I think the first point I would like to make, I would like really to see a huge difference in the way those of us who are leaders, we act. And we demand of ourselves action, results, accountability. I think if that happens, we will have the huge energy of our own people in different levels, whether they are young or adults, they are business, they are scientists, wherever they are, to really harness the capacity for us to achieve better results. You'll see countries we are thriving, which are thriving, are countries which are really very inclusive. And it's not only on gender issues, but everyone in society has a say, everyone has a responsibility, everyone has to be accountable for what is happening. When you have a nation united around a specific goal, then you will build the bridges. And even in terms of equity and the dynamics of what a development is to be will change completely. So I want us to change now so that we can, whatever we are to see in 10 years' time, to achieve that, I think we need to change. We need to change. When we come next time to meet, wherever we will be here in Cape Town, instead of continuing to say, let's do this, let's say what we have done, what we have achieved, and then how do we move for the next stage? That would be the Africa I want. It's not what I want to see then, it's the Africa I want to see now. because that's where change has to begin.
Cool. Dr. Adesina.
Well, let me just re-echo what my big sister said, that we've got to be so impatient with moving Africa forward relentlessly. We have no choice. You know, in 2025, there's absolutely no reason why Africa should not be totally lit up with the power it needs to industrialize. Because we must not forget, no economy ever develops unless you have the base load power to drive industries and to be competitive, right? So while we must explore every single thing, you know, we will use the sun until the sun becomes the moon, right? We'll tap all of that renewable energy. But let's not forget, for this country this continent to create the jobs it needs fast, we must have base load power. So I believe that in 10 years, to our accountability point, we absolutely must develop Africa with pride and have universal access to electricity. The second is, you know, the President, Macky Sall, is here, and I want to thank him in particular for his leadership on the issue of agriculture. Because we are all talking today about economic headwinds that Africa faces. But where will Africa actually diversify into? Well, the place that Africa should diversify into is agriculture. We have massive amount of potential in that, right? Nobody drinks oil, nobody smokes gas, everybody eats food, right? And Africa has to be a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. My big sister Ngozi is here. When she was Minister of Finance in Nigeria, we worked so hard, Aliko and everybody else. I really believe that Africa must unlock all of its potential in agriculture and move to the top of the value chain in agriculture within 10 years. We at the African Development Bank have set that bold stop for ourselves. We're going to work on it with our leaders. 10 years, Africa must be able to feed itself, but also be competitive in global markets. The third thing is what Barton was saying. You know, I went to Senegal just a week before I took over as president of the African Development Bank. I went to this place, which is I think is the Gore Island, and the president was generous to allow me to take me there. When I went over there, I stood at that place where they call the door of no return. And as I stood there with all the emotions and all of that, I got back into my car, and I asked myself the question: when the slaves were being taken out of here, they left against their own volition. They were pushed in on boats and just pushed outside, right? But here we are, with a lot of Africa's youth, the future of Africa, voluntarily pushing themselves into rickety boats to go to the Mediterranean on their way to Europe. No, that's not what we need. What we need is to revolutionize our continent, to create the jobs, opportunities for our youth to be here so that we can develop with pride. There is nothing. I mean, there's nothing to be proud about the fact that we lost 3,500 young people sitting at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. That's an embarrassment for us as Africans. And I think this is what we need to really do. I want to agree with Grac. We must hold ourselves accountable for these things. We've got to push very, very hard. We've got no choice but to leave a development dividend on this continent. But for those that think Africa has these huge ambitions, I just got one word for you. It's the fact that we have no choice than to be ambitious on this continent. And because I really believe that in 10 years, this will be a continent that is prosperous with inclusive growth, I agree with my sister, but also a continent that finally will have developed with pride, and all the things that people used to say, we can't feed ourselves, we can't have electricity, no, that will be gone. We will have been able to do that by the special grace of God, I must say. Thank you.
Thank you again for sharing these encouraging views. And ladies and gentlemen, what Grac claimed, and Professor Schwab mentioned, I'm convinced we are a community, as a community of the World Economic Forum, a community of action. I would bet that all of you, 1,200 participants, have similar ideas in mind, dreams and visions for Africa. And that means now it's on all of us to use these World Economic Forum on Africa 2016 to turn these ideas, dreams and visions into reality. So thank you again to these extraordinary panelists. Thank you very much to all of you.